My nephew mocked my German Shepherd. He didn't know I was his job interviewer. The email notification pinged on my phone at 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday, just as I was helping Kaiser settle into his orthopedic bed. My 3-year-old German Shepherd's back legs trembled slightly as he lowered himself down, a reminder of the spinal injury that nearly killed him before I found him abandoned outside that Cincinnati shelter 18 months ago. Daniel Morrison has submitted an application for Senior Marketing Coordinator, the subject line read. I almost deleted it without opening. Almost. But something about that last name nagged at me until I remembered. Morrison was my sister Linda's married name. My fingers hesitated over the phone screen as Kaiser's amber eyes tracked my movement. He always knew when something was off. Sure enough, the application belonged to Danny, Linda's 23-year-old son who'd been living in her basement since graduating college. The same Danny who'd somehow managed to avoid every family gathering I'd attended in the past 2 years. The same Danny whose resume, I had to admit, was surprisingly impressive for someone I still pictured as the snotty kid who used to steal cookies at Christmas. Michigan State University, marketing degree, magna cum laude. Internships at 2 solid firms. References that actually meant something in the industry. The position paid $78,000 starting, with benefits that could set a young professional up for life. In our mid-sized city, that salary could buy independence, respect, a real future. I scrolled through his cover letter, noting the polished language and clear ambition. Professional Danny was articulate, hungry, everything I looked for in a candidate. The kind of person who could genuinely contribute to the digital marketing firm I'd spent the last 8 years building from nothing into a $2.3 million annual revenue company. Kaiser whined softly, nudging my free hand with his massive head. His tail managed 3 slow wags before the effort became too much. I scratched behind his ears, feeling the familiar surge of protective fury that had never quite faded since the vet explained his condition. Severe spinal trauma, probably from being hit by a car, Dr. Jennifer Martinez had told me that first day. His back legs will never be fully functional. He'll need daily physical therapy, special accommodations, medication for the rest of his life. Many people in your position would consider. She trailed off diplomatically, but I knew what she meant. Many people would consider euthanasia the practical choice. The economical choice. The convenient choice for a damaged dog that would require thousands in ongoing care. Instead, I'd written a check for $4,300 on the spot. 18 months later, Kaiser was the best investment I'd ever made. Not financially, his monthly medications alone cost more than some people's car payments, but in ways that actually mattered. His loyalty was absolute, his spirit unbroken despite everything he'd endured. Some mornings, watching him determinedly navigate the specially built ramps throughout our house, I wondered who had actually rescued whom. I looked at Danny's application again, thumb hovering over the schedule interview button. Standard protocol was a phone screening first, then an in-person interview if he passed. Given his qualifications and our current staffing needs, he'd almost certainly make it to round 2. The smart business decision was obvious. The family obligation decision was equally clear, help Linda's son get his life started, maybe even strengthen some burned bridges with my sister. But something held me back. Maybe it was the late hour, or the way Kaiser's breathing had that slightly labored quality that always worried me, or just instinct honed by years of reading people in high-stakes negotiations. I set the phone aside. Tomorrow, I'd call Linda for some overdue family catch-up. I called Linda the next morning at 9:15 a.m., right after Kaiser's physical therapy session. He was napping in a patch of sunlight by my office window, his breathing finally even and peaceful. The conversation started normally enough, weather, work, our parents' upcoming anniversary. But Linda seemed distracted, her voice carrying that particular strain I remembered from our childhood when she was hiding something. Danny's been job hunting, she mentioned after 20 minutes of small talk. Finally ready to move out, thank God. Rick and I need our space back. That's great, I said, keeping my voice neutral. What kind of work is he looking for? Marketing stuff. He's got this interview lined up that he's really excited about, some digital company downtown. Says it's his dream position and the salary would let him get his own place. Linda's laugh had a bitter edge. Honestly, Sarah, I love my son, but he's been difficult lately. Really difficult. Something in her tone made me lean forward. Difficult how? A long pause. Kaiser stirred in his sleep, legs twitching like he was running in his dreams. I wondered if dogs with disabilities dreamed of being whole. He's got mean, Linda finally said. I don't know where it came from, but he says these awful things. Especially about. She hesitated. God, I shouldn't even tell you this. Tell me what? About your dog. Kaiser. The name came out like an apology. Danny was here Sunday for dinner, and Rick mentioned seeing your Facebook post about that charity walk you did for the animal shelter. Danny just went off. Said you were pathetic for wasting money on a crippled mutt that should have been put down months ago. My hand tightened around the phone. The morning coffee turned to acid in my stomach. Linda, what exactly did he say? Sarah, I don't think. What did he say? Another pause. I could hear her moving around her kitchen, the familiar clink of dishes being washed. Normal sounds from a normal morning where my nephew apparently felt comfortable mocking my dog at the dinner table. He said you were a joke. Said anyone who spends thousands on a useless animal when there are perfectly healthy dogs in shelters is just showing off. Then he. Linda's voice dropped to almost a whisper. He said Kaiser was probably suffering and you were too selfish to do the right thing. Said someone should report you for animal cruelty. The room went very quiet. Even Kaiser seemed to sense the change in atmosphere, lifting his head to look at me with those intelligent amber eyes that held more loyalty than most humans possessed. And what did you say? I asked. I told him to shut his mouth and apologize, but he just laughed. Said I was as delusional as you if I thought a dog that can barely walk was worth more than a used car. Linda's voice cracked slightly. Rick threw him out. We haven't spoken to him since Sunday. Sunday. 3 days ago. Danny had submitted his application Monday night, probably still riding high on his cruel little performance for his parents. I stared at his resume, still open on my computer screen. Michigan State, magna cum laude. Glowing references. Articulate cover letter expressing his passion for ethical business practices and building positive community relationships. Sarah. You still there? I'm here. My voice sounded strange, even to me. Linda, what company did you say Danny was interviewing with? Some digital marketing firm downtown. Why? I looked at Kaiser, now fully awake and watching me with that uncanny intelligence that never failed to amaze me. His tail managed two small wags, as if he understood that this conversation was somehow about him. Just curious. I know most of the firms in the area. I ended the call with Linda feeling like I'd swallowed broken glass. Kaiser must have sensed my mood because he struggled to his feet and limped over, resting his massive head against my knee. His weight was solid, comforting, real, a living reminder of everything Danny had dismissed as worthless. My phone buzzed with a text from my assistant, Monica. Danny Morrison called asking about interview scheduling. Says he's extremely flexible and available anytime this week. Kid sounds eager. Eager. I bet he was. I spent the next hour doing something I'd never done before, deep diving into a candidate's social media presence with the specific intent to find ammunition. What I discovered made Linda's dinner table confession look like a gentle disagreement. Danny's Instagram was a masterclass in entitled millennial stereotypes. Photos of expensive dinners he clearly couldn't afford, captions complaining about fake people and participation trophy society. But it was his Twitter that really revealed his character. A steady stream of cruel observations about homeless people, disabled individuals, anyone he deemed weak or burdensome to society. 3 weeks ago, saw some lady at Kroger spending food stamps on organic dog food while her kid ate generic cereal. Priorities much. 2 weeks ago, disability parking is just legal cheating. Half these people could walk fine if they weren't so lazy. Last Tuesday, the day after Linda's dinner, know someone who spent $5,000 plus on surgery for a lame dog. Same energy as keeping a brain-dead relative on life support. Sometimes mercy means making tough choices. That last one had 2 retweets and 7 likes. 7 people had actively endorsed my nephew's suggestion that I should have let Kaiser die. I screenshotted everything, though I wasn't sure why yet. Maybe for Linda, to show her exactly what her son had become when he thought no one was watching. Maybe for my own sanity, proof that what I was considering wasn't an overreaction. At 2:30 p.m., I called Danny directly. Mr. Morrison. This is Sarah Chen from Tech Reach Digital. I'm calling about your application for our senior marketing coordinator position. MS. Chen. His voice transformed instantly into that artificially enthusiastic tone reserved for potential employers. Thank you so much for calling. I've been following your company's growth, and I'm incredibly excited about the opportunity to contribute to your team. Following our growth. Right. He probably Googled us for 5 minutes after submitting his application. Your qualifications are impressive, I said, which was true. I'd like to schedule an in-person interview for Thursday at 3 p.m., if that works with your schedule. Absolutely. Thursday at 3 is perfect. Should I ask, what's the office address? I gave him our downtown location, the same building where I'd started with just myself and a laptop 8 years ago. He'd probably driven past it 100 times, never knowing his aunt owned the company inside. One more thing, I added. This is a senior-level position with significant client interaction. Part of our interview process includes discussing how candidates handle challenging situations and demonstrate emotional intelligence. You might want to prepare some examples of times you've shown empathy or gone above and beyond for someone who needed help. The irony was so thick I almost choked on it. Of course, Danny said smoothly. I have several examples of leadership and community involvement that demonstrate my commitment to making a positive impact. Wonderful. I look forward to hearing them. After hanging up, I sat in my office for a long time, watching Kaiser sleep. His legs twitched again, more running dreams. In my favorite fantasy, he was chasing tennis balls across endless fields on 4 strong legs, the wind lifting his ears as he bounded through tall grass without pain. Thursday was 2 days away. 48 hours to decide exactly how this would play out. Wednesday evening, I was going through Danny's references when Monica knocked on my office door. She looked uncomfortable, shifting her weight from foot to foot while Kaiser lifted his head to acknowledge her presence. Sarah. I need to tell you something about tomorrow's interview. I minimized the background check results on my screen, 3 solid references, all of whom had glowing things to say about Daniel Morrison's work ethic and creativity. The disconnect between professional Danny and social media Danny was becoming more pronounced by the hour. What's up? Danny Morrison called again around 4 p.m. Asked if he could bring his portfolio on a tablet instead of printed copies, said it would be more environmentally conscious. Monica paused, her expression troubled. But then he made this weird comment about hoping your office was accessible since his last interview was in a building with too many stairs and he saw some disabled woman struggling to get around. My blood chilled. What exactly did he say? He laughed about it. Said it was painful to watch and that companies should just conduct phone interviews instead of making people parade their problems around in public. Monica's voice dropped. Sarah, I've never heard anyone talk like that. It was really ugly. I looked down at Kaiser, who had dragged himself over to lie beside my desk chair. His daily afternoon walk had been shorter than usual, his back legs were having a particularly bad day. The specialized harness I bought to help support his hindquarters hung on its hook by the door, bright blue nylon that cost more than most people spent on their own shoes. Did you tell him anything about our office layout? Just that we're on the ground floor with accessible parking. But now I'm wondering if I should have asked why he was asking. Monica frowned. Is there something I should know about this interview? I almost told her then. Monica had been with me for 3 years, since we were still small enough that everyone knew everyone's birthday and favorite coffee order. She'd been here the day I brought Kaiser to work for the first time, had helped me figure out the best spot for his bed where he could see me but stay out of foot traffic. She'd even contributed $200 to his surgery fund before I told her that wasn't necessary. Just, take extra notes tomorrow, okay? I want detailed documentation of everything. After Monica left, I called Dr. Martinez's office. It was nearly 6 p.m., but she was still there finishing up paperwork. Sarah. How's our favorite patient doing? It's been a few weeks since Kaiser's last checkup. He's having a rough day today. More wobbling than usual, couldn't make it up the front steps without help this morning. I watched him sleep, his breathing steady but his legs occasionally jerking. Dr. Martinez, I need you to be honest with me about something. Always. Is he suffering? Not just physically uncomfortable, but actually suffering in a way that... I couldn't finish the sentence. A long pause. Sarah, we've talked about this before. Kaiser has chronic pain that we manage with medication. His mobility is limited, and that limitation will probably worsen over time. But suffering? That's about more than physical sensation. Meaning I watch him every time you bring him in. I see how he lights up when you enter the room, how he pushes himself to walk just to stay close to you, how he still gets excited about car rides and treats and new smells. Dogs don't have existential crises about their limitations. They adapt and find joy where they can. Her voice softened. Has someone said something to make you doubt your decision to treat him? The question hung in the air like smoke. Outside my office window, I could see the parking garage where I'd had 2 accessible spaces installed last year after hiring Marcus, whose cerebral palsy required him to use forearm crutches. The modification cost $3,400. Danny would probably call that wasteful too. Someone suggested I was being selfish. That keeping him alive was cruel. Someone who doesn't know Kaiser, I'm guessing. Dr. Martinez's voice turned sharp. Sarah, in 15 years of veterinary practice, I've seen real animal suffering. I've seen owners who keep pets alive for their own emotional needs while the animal is clearly ready to go. That is not what's happening here. Kaiser has a disability, not a death sentence. There's a difference, and anyone who can't see that difference probably says similar things about disabled humans. After hanging up, I sat with that observation for a long time. Kaiser woke up around 8 p.m. and managed to eat his dinner with enthusiasm, tail wagging as I prepared his evening medication. Suffering creatures don't wag their tails at the sound of food bowls. At 9:23 p.m., I sent Monica an email, please schedule Danny Morrison's interview for 3 p.m. sharp tomorrow. I'll be conducting it personally. Thursday morning, I arrived at the office 2 hours early. Kaiser seemed to sense something important was happening. He'd insisted on coming with me despite his legs being stiff from the cold October weather. Monica had set up his bed in the corner of my office where he'd be visible during the interview but out of the way. At 10:30 a.m., my phone rang. Linda. Sarah, I need to ask you something, and please don't take this the wrong way. Her voice was strained. Danny came home last night talking about this interview today, and he mentioned the company name. Tech Reach Digital. That's your company, isn't it? My stomach dropped. Linda. Oh God, it is. Sarah, please tell me this is just a coincidence. Please tell me you didn't know it was Danny when you scheduled this interview. I stared at Kaiser, who was watching me with those intuitive amber eyes. I found out Monday night when his application came through. And you didn't tell me? Linda's voice rose. Sarah, what are you planning? Because I know you, and I know how you get when someone hurts something you care about. The accusation stung because it was partially true. I did have a protective streak that ran deep, it's what made me a fierce negotiator and a loyal friend. But it also made me unforgiving when lines got crossed. He called my dog a crippled mutt, Linda. Said I should have him put down. Said I'm pathetic for caring about her. I know what he said. I was there. But he's 23 and stupid and living in my basement because he can't get his life together. You're successful and powerful and about to dangle his dream job in front of him like revenge bait. So I should just pretend it never happened. Give him the job anyway. I'm asking you to be the bigger person here. You're 42 years old, for Christ's sake. Don't destroy my son's future because he said something cruel about your dog. The casual dismissal in her voice, your dog, like Kaiser was a houseplant, hit harder than I expected. This isn't about revenge, Linda. This is about character. Do you really want me to put someone who mocks disabled beings in charge of client relationships? Someone who thinks compassion is a weakness? He doesn't really believe those things. He's just angry. Frustrated. He's been rejected from 12 jobs in 6 months. Maybe there's a reason for that. The line went quiet except for Linda's sharp breathing. If you humiliate him today, if you drag him through an interview just to reject him because of what he said about Kaiser, I will never forgive you. Never. She hung up before I could respond. At 2:45 p.m., I was reviewing Danny's portfolio one final time when Monica buzzed my intercom. He's here. 15 minutes early, nice suit, very polished. Should I send him in? Through my office window, I could see the reception area. Danny looked professional in a charcoal gray suit that probably cost more than he could afford on his non-existent salary. His hair was perfectly styled, shoes shined, portfolio tucked under his arm. Every inch the promising young executive. Kaiser stirred in his bed, lifting his head as if he could sense a change in the air pressure. His tail didn't wag. Give me 5 minutes, then send him in. I walked over to Kaiser's bed and knelt beside him, scratching behind his ears the way he loved. His tail managed 3 gentle thumps against the cushion. What do you think, buddy? I whispered. Ready to meet your biggest fan? At exactly 3 p.m., Monica knocked and opened my door. Miss Chen. Daniel Morrison is here for his interview. Danny stepped into my office with confident strides and an extended hand, his smile bright and professional. Miss Chen, thank you so much for this opportunity. I can't tell you how excited I am to. He stopped mid-sentence. The color drained from his face as his eyes moved from me to the nameplate on my desk to Kaiser lying in his bed. Aunt Sarah. His voice came out as barely a whisper. I let the silence stretch between us, watching every micro-expression cross Danny's face. Shock melted into recognition, then embarrassment, then something that looked almost like panic. His professional handshake dissolved into an awkward half-wave before his arm dropped to his side. Hello, Danny. I kept my voice level, businesslike. Please, have a seat. He remained frozen by the door, his portfolio clutched against his chest like armor. Kaiser lifted his head at the sound of a new voice, tail giving a single, cautious wag. Even disabled and in pain, my dog's first instinct was friendliness toward strangers. I didn't know. Danny stammered, his carefully rehearsed interview persona cracking like cheap paint. Didn't know what? I settled back in my chair, gesturing again to the seat across from my desk. That Sarah Chen was your aunt? Or that Tech Reach Digital was my company? His Adam's apple bobbed as he swallowed hard. Both. Neither. I mean. It's a simple question, Danny. What exactly didn't you know? The power dynamic was shifting by the second. 5 minutes ago, he'd walked in here as the eager candidate ready to charm his way into a $78,000 position. Now he was my nephew, the same kid who used to hide behind Linda's skirt at family barbecues, except this version had spent Sunday evening explaining to his parents why my dog deserved to die. Finally, he moved to the chair, perching on its edge like he might need to bolt at any moment. Aunt Sarah, listen, if this is about. This is a job interview, I interrupted smoothly. Let's keep it professional. You applied for the senior marketing coordinator position. I'd like to hear why you think you're qualified. Danny's mouth opened and closed twice before he managed to speak. My resume shows my qualifications. Michigan State, magna cum laude, internships at Morrison & Associates and Blue Line Marketing. Impressive credentials, I agreed. Tell me about your experience with client relationship management. How do you handle difficult personalities or sensitive situations? He was sweating now, despite the October chill coming through my office windows. I pride myself on emotional intelligence and adaptability. I believe in treating every client with respect and finding common ground, even when we disagree. Interesting approach. I made a note on the legal pad in front of me, though I was just drawing random lines. Can you give me a specific example of a time you showed compassion or went above and beyond for someone who needed help? The question I'd warned him to prepare for on Tuesday. Danny's eyes darted to Kaiser, who had managed to stand up and was slowly making his way across the office. Each step was deliberate, his back legs trembling with effort, but his destination was clear, he wanted to investigate this new person. Well, Danny started, then stopped as Kaiser reached his chair. My dog sniffed politely at Danny's expensive shoes, tail wagging hopefully. There was this project at Blue Line where a client had unrealistic expectations. I watched my nephew's face as Kaiser looked up at him with those trusting amber eyes. The same eyes Danny had dismissed as belonging to a useless mutt just 4 days ago. The same dog he'd suggested should be put down for everyone's convenience. Go on, I prompted when Danny's story faltered. The client wanted, they needed. He was staring down at Kaiser, who had settled beside the chair and rested his chin on his front paws. Waiting patiently, the way he always did when meeting new people. They were having budget issues, so we restructured the payment plan to help them succeed. How thoughtful of you to accommodate their financial limitations. I kept my tone neutral, professional. At Tech Reach Digital, we often work with clients who have various needs and challenges. Some require special accommodations, extra patience, modified approaches. How do you feel about investing time and resources in situations that might not offer immediate returns? Danny's jaw tightened. He understood exactly what I was really asking. I believe, he said carefully, that every situation should be evaluated on its own merits. Cost-benefit analysis is important in any business decision. Even when dealing with, how did you put it in your cover letter? Building positive community relationships. His face flushed red. Aunt Sarah. Ms. Chen, I corrected sharply. This is a professional interview, Mr. Morrison. Please maintain appropriate boundaries. Kaiser chose that moment to struggle back to his feet, his back legs giving out briefly before he regained his balance. Danny watched the entire process, his expression unreadable. Tell me, I continued, what's your philosophy on corporate social responsibility? How should companies handle situations involving disabled employees or community members? The trap was closing, and we both knew it. Danny stared at me for a long moment, his face cycling through emotions like a broken traffic light. When he finally spoke, his voice had lost all its professional polish. You're really going to sit there and pretend this is a legitimate interview? I'm conducting the same interview I'd give any candidate, I replied evenly. You submitted an application, we scheduled time to discuss your qualifications. What exactly do you think is illegitimate about that? He gestured wildly toward Kaiser, who had managed to make it back to his bed and was lowering himself down with careful precision. This whole setup. You know what I said about him. You're just trying to make me look bad. You think Kaiser makes you look bad? I leaned forward slightly. Interesting perspective. Most people find him quite charming. That's not what I meant and you know it. Danny's professional mask was completely gone now, replaced by the petulant tone I remembered from childhood tantrums. Look, I'm sorry if I hurt your feelings, okay? I didn't know you'd find out about it. Ah. I made another note. So you're sorry I found out. Not sorry you said it. His mouth snapped shut like a bear trap. Behind him, Kaiser's tail thumped twice against his bed. He always got excited when he successfully completed the difficult journey across the office. Let me ask you something else, I continued, consulting Danny's resume. You list ethical communication strategies as one of your core competencies. Can you elaborate on what that means to you? It means being honest and transparent in all business dealings, he recited, probably quoting directly from some college textbook. Honest and transparent. Like posting on social media about people you consider burdensome to society. Danny went very still. You looked at my social media. Standard background check for senior positions. We're very thorough here at Tech Reach Digital. I pulled up his Twitter feed on my computer screen. October 15th, disability parking is just legal cheating. Half these people could walk fine if they weren't so lazy. That's an interesting perspective on honesty and transparency. That was taken out of context. What context makes that statement appropriate for someone seeking a position in client relations? He opened his mouth, closed it, then tried again. I was having a bad day. People post stupid stuff when they're frustrated. October 8th, I continued reading. Know someone who spent $5,000 plus on surgery for a lame dog. Same energy as keeping a brain-dead relative on life support. I looked up from the screen. Another bad day. Danny's face had gone from red to pale green. Aunt Sarah, please. Ms. Chen. My voice could have frosted the windows. And I'm still waiting for an answer. You've demonstrated a pattern of public statements about disabled individuals, both human and animal. How does this align with our company values of inclusion and community support? I never meant. You never meant for anyone to see it. Or you never meant what you wrote. Kaiser whined softly from his bed, picking up on the tension in the room. Without thinking, I made the soft clicking sound that always comforted him. His tail wagged once in response. Danny watched this exchange, and something shifted in his expression. For a moment, he looked less like the arrogant young man from Linda's dinner table and more like the confused kid I remembered. He really means that much to you? He asked quietly. He means everything to me. But he's just a dog. A damaged dog. The words hung in the air between us like a challenge. Outside my office, I could hear the normal sounds of a Thursday afternoon, phones ringing, keyboards clicking, Monica scheduling appointments. The regular rhythm of a successful business built on treating people with dignity and respect. Mr. Morrison, I said finally, I think this interview is over. Danny didn't move from his chair. Instead, he leaned back and crossed his arms, his expression shifting from panic to something that looked almost like defiance. You know what? No. I'm not leaving yet. His voice carried a bitter edge I'd never heard before. You want to play games? Let's play games. You dragged me here under false pretenses, Aunt Sarah. You knew exactly who I was when you scheduled this interview. I told you to call me Ms. Chen. And I told you this whole thing is bullshit. He gestured around my office, taking in the awards on the walls, the view of downtown Cincinnati, the success I'd built over 8 years. You could have just called Mom and told her what I said. Could have had it out with me at the next family dinner. But instead you decided to fuck with my career because I hurt your precious feelings about your crippled dog. Kaiser's ears flattened at the harsh tone. He tried to lift his head but seemed to think better of it, settling deeper into his orthopedic bed. Your career prospects were never my responsibility, Danny. Weren't they? He leaned forward, his professional polish completely abandoned. Your family. You own a successful company in exactly the field I want to work in. You could have been mentoring me this whole time, helping me get established, but instead you've ignored my existence for years. The accusation hit closer to home than I wanted to admit. It was true that I'd avoided most family gatherings, partly because of my demanding schedule but mostly because Linda's kids had always seemed like spoiled brats who'd never faced real consequences for anything. So this is my fault somehow. You tell me. When's the last time you came to a family dinner? When's the last time you showed any interest in my life or my goals? Danny's voice was rising. But the second I say something you don't like about your dog, suddenly you're paying attention. Suddenly you care enough to manipulate me into this humiliating setup. I glanced at Kaiser, whose breathing had taken on that slightly labored quality that always worried me when he was stressed. This interview was scheduled because you submitted a qualified application for an open position. Everything that happened after that was your choice. My choice. Danny laughed, but there was no humor in it. I didn't choose to have my aunt turn out to be my interviewer. I didn't choose to find out that my family member was planning to sabotage me. Nobody sabotaged you, Danny. You sabotaged yourself the moment you decided it was acceptable to mock disabled beings at your parents' dinner table. It was a private conversation. Posted on public social media. A figure of speech. About a living being you suggested should be killed. We stared at each other across my desk, the temperature in the room seeming to drop several degrees. Danny's chest was rising and falling rapidly, his hands clenched into fists on his knees. You want to know what the real problem is here, he said finally. It's not what I said about your dog. It's that you're a lonely, middle-aged woman who treats an animal better than she treats her own family. You spend thousands on a pet that can barely walk while your nephew lives in his parents' basement because he can't find work in his field. The words were designed to hurt, and they found their mark. I felt heat rising in my cheeks, my professional composure starting to crack. And you think insulting me will somehow improve your employment prospects? I think this whole interview was over before I walked through that door. At least now we're being honest about it. Danny stood up, smoothing down his expensive suit. Just do me one favor, Aunt Sarah. When you reject my application, have the guts to tell me it's because of what I said about Kaiser. Don't hide behind some professional bullshit about cultural fit or communication skills. He headed toward the door, then stopped with his hand on the handle. And maybe ask yourself who's really being cruel here. The door clicked shut behind Danny with a finality that seemed to echo through my office. I sat frozen at my desk, his last words reverberating in my head like accusations I couldn't shake. Kaiser whined softly from his bed, sensing the emotional wreckage left in my nephew's wake. My hands were trembling. When had that started? I reached for my coffee mug, empty, cold, and set it down harder than necessary. The small ceramic clink made Kaiser's ears perk up, amber eyes tracking my movement with that uncanny intuition that always made me wonder how much he actually understood. Who's really being cruel here? Danny's parting shot had found its target with surgical precision. I'd spent the last 3 days convincing myself this was about accountability, about consequences, about protecting my company's values. But sitting alone in my office with the afternoon light slanting through windows that suddenly felt too bright, I couldn't escape the uncomfortable truth in his accusation. I had manipulated him. I had set up this entire scenario knowing exactly how it would end. My phone buzzed against the desk, a text from Monica. How did the interview go? Should I send a standard rejection letter? Standard rejection letter. Like Danny was just another unqualified candidate instead of my sister's son whose career I just torpedoed with the precision of a guided missile. I started typing several responses and deleted them all. At 4:17 p.m., while I was still staring at the blank text field, my office door burst open without a knock. Linda stood in the doorway, her face flushed and her hands shaking with what I recognized as barely contained fury. Monica tried to stop me, but I told her this was a family emergency. Linda's voice was deadly quiet, the kind of calm that preceded hurricanes. Danny just called me from his car. He told me everything. Kaiser struggled to his feet, tail wagging uncertainly. He'd always liked Linda, but even he could sense the electricity crackling in the air between us. Linda, you can't just. Shut up. She stepped into my office and closed the door behind her with deliberate care. Just shut up and listen for once in your self-righteous life. I'd seen my sister angry before. Growing up, Linda's temper was legendary, but this was different. This was cold, calculated rage that had been building for 3 days. Do you have any idea what you just did to him? She remained standing, her purse clutched in white-knuckled hands. Any idea at all? He did it to himself when he what? Hurt your feelings. Said something stupid about your dog. Linda's voice rose despite her obvious effort to control it. Jesus Christ, Sarah, he's 23 years old. 23. We all said horrible things when we were 23. Not like that. Not about innocent beings who. Innocent beings. Linda's laugh was sharp enough to cut glass. You're talking about him like he committed war crimes instead of making a thoughtless comment about a pet. The word pet landed like a slap. Kaiser wasn't a pet, he was family, a soul I'd rescued from abandonment and pain, a living being whose loyalty humbled me daily. But to Linda, he was just a dog. An expensive, inconvenient dog that her sister valued more than human relationships. You don't understand, I said quietly. You've never understood. Then explain it to me. Make me understand how you justify destroying your nephew's future because he doesn't share your emotional attachment to an animal. I looked at Kaiser, who had given up trying to navigate the tension and settled back into his bed. His legs were having a particularly bad day. I could see him favoring his left hip, the slight tremor in his hindquarters that meant his pain medication was wearing off. He said Kaiser was suffering. That I was being cruel by keeping him alive. My voice sounded strange, distant. He suggested someone should report me for animal cruelty. Linda's expression softened slightly, but her posture remained rigid. Sarah, he was being an ass. A young, frustrated ass who said something horrible. But that doesn't give you the right to play God with his career. I didn't play God. I conducted a legitimate interview and... Bullshit. The word exploded out of her with enough force to make both Kaiser and me flinch. You set a trap and watched him walk into it. You let him hope, let him think he finally had a chance at independence, and then you crushed him because he wounded your pride. The accusation hung between us like a living thing. Outside my office, I could hear the normal sounds of the workday winding down, people saying goodbye, computers shutting down, the elevator chiming as employees headed home to their families. Their normal, uncomplicated families where aunts didn't sabotage nephews over dinner table conversations. Linda, I started, but she held up a hand to stop me. I'm not finished. You want to know what Danny said when he called me? He said you were right. Said he was an asshole for what he posted on social media and what he said about Kaiser. Her voice cracked slightly. He said he deserved what happened today. My stomach dropped. He said that. 23 years old, Sarah. Living in our basement, rejected from 13 jobs now, and he thinks he deserves to have his own family sabotage his chances at success. Linda's eyes were bright with unshed tears. How does that make you feel? Proud? Vindicated? Like you've successfully defended Kaiser's honor? I couldn't answer. Couldn't speak past the sudden tightness in my throat. He also said something else, Linda continued, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. He said he understood now why you love that dog so much. Said watching Kaiser struggle across your office, seeing how gentle he was even when Danny had been cruel about him, it made him realize what kind of person he'd become. I stightened in my chair. What do you mean? He's been volunteering at the animal shelter on Coleraine Avenue for the past 6 months, Sarah. Every Saturday morning, cleaning kennels and walking dogs. Linda's laugh was bitter. Funny how that never came up in your thorough background check. The words hit me like cold water. That's impossible. His social media posts were him being an edgy asshole online because he was angry and frustrated and taking it out on easy targets. Linda pulled out her phone, fingers flying across the screen. Here. This is from the shelter's Facebook page last weekend. She thrust the phone toward me. On the screen was a photo of Danny, unmistakable in his Michigan State sweatshirt, kneeling beside an elderly golden retriever with clouded eyes and graying fur. The caption read, Volunteer Spotlight, Danny Morrison has been with us for 6 months and has a special gift with our senior and special needs dogs. This is Maggie, who was returned twice due to her age and arthritis. Danny spent 3 hours helping her feel comfortable with potential adopters yesterday. My mouth went dry. Linda, I don't understand. Neither do I. She snatched the phone back, her composure finally cracking. I don't understand how my son can be compassionate enough to spend his Saturdays caring for disabled animals but cruel enough to mock yours. I don't understand how my sister can be successful enough to build a multi-million-dollar company but vindictive enough to destroy a family member over words spoken in anger. Kaiser whined from his bed, struggling again to get up. This time I went to him, kneeling beside his orthopedic cushion and running my hands along his sides to check for tension. His tail wagged weakly against the floor. There's more, Linda said, her voice now completely hollow. The reason Danny's been living in our basement, the reason he's been so angry and bitter. He's been sending 60% of every unemployment check to pay for his college roommate's cancer treatments. Kid named Marcus who couldn't afford his medications. The room tilted. What? Marcus Fernandez. Ring any bells? It did. Marcus was my graphic designer, hired 8 months ago. Quiet, talented, used forearm crutches due to cerebral palsy. The accessible parking spaces I'd had installed were partly for him. Marcus works here, I whispered. Danny got him the job. Heard through a friend that TechReach was hiring, spent weeks coaching Marcus for the interview, helped him practice answers about accommodation needs. Linda's voice was like broken glass. Danny never mentioned they knew each other because Marcus asked him not to. Didn't want anyone thinking he got hired as a favor. I thought about Marcus, his quiet professionalism, the way he'd thanked me effusively for the parking modifications. How he'd mentioned once that his friend's encouragement had given him the confidence to apply. The cancer treatments, I managed. Is Marcus sick? Not Marcus. His 8-year-old daughter, Elena. Leukemia. Linda wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. Danny's been broke for months because he's been helping pay for a sick child's medical bills. That's why he was so desperate for this job. That's why it was his dream position. The weight of what I'd done began settling over me like concrete. Linda, I didn't know. Because you didn't want to know. You wanted him to be the villain in your story about defending poor Kaiser. She gestured toward my dog, who was watching us both with confused amber eyes. Well, congratulations, Sarah. You won. You protected your dog's honor and destroyed a young man who's been secretly supporting a cancer patient while volunteering at animal shelters. The silence stretched between us, filled only with the sound of Kaiser's slightly labored breathing and the distant hum of the building's ventilation system. What do you want me to do? I asked finally. Linda looked at me for a long moment, her expression cycling through anger, disappointment, and something that might have been pity. I want you to figure out who you really are, Sarah. Because the woman who rescued Kaiser and the woman who destroyed Danny today. They can't both be you. She left my office without another word, the door closing behind her with a soft click that somehow sounded louder than if she'd slammed it. I remained kneeling beside Kaiser's bed, my hand resting on his warm side, feeling the steady rise and fall of his breathing while my own seemed to have stopped entirely. Marcus Fernandez. 8-year-old Elena with leukemia. 60% of Danny's unemployment checks. The volunteer photo Linda had shown me was burned into my retinas, my nephew's gentle expression as he worked with an arthritic golden retriever, the same hands I'd watched tremble during our interview now steady and patient with an elderly dog that other people had thrown away. At 4:47 p.m., I found myself standing outside Marcus's cubicle. He was still at his desk, working on mock-ups for the Henderson account, his forearm crutches leaning against the wall beside his chair. The accessible desk I'd special ordered for him, height adjustable, extra legroom, ergonomic keyboard tray, had cost $1,200. I'd approved the expense without hesitation. Marcus? Could I speak with you for a moment? He looked up with that quiet smile that had made him memorable during his interview 8 months ago. Of course, Ms. Chen. Is this about the Henderson designs? I can have the final versions ready by tomorrow morning. Actually, it's about something else. Do you know someone named Danny Morrison? The change in Marcus's expression was immediate and telling. His shoulders tensed, and he glanced around the office as if checking who might be listening. May I ask why you're asking? He interviewed for a position here today. Your name came up in background information. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, his fingers still poised over his keyboard. Danny asked me not to mention our friendship when I applied here. He didn't want anyone thinking I got hired as a favor instead of on my merit. But he helped you prepare for the interview. He spent 3 weeks coaching me. Mock interviews every evening after I got home from physical therapy. Marcus's voice was soft, almost reverent. I was terrified about discussing my accommodation needs, worried it would count against me. Danny made me practice until I could talk about my cerebral palsy like it was just another professional consideration. My chest felt tight. Marcus, I need to ask you something personal, and you don't have to answer. But is your daughter sick? The color drained from his face. How did you? He stopped, understanding flooding his features. Danny's interview didn't go well, did it? I thought about my nephew's face when he'd walked into my office, the way his professional confidence had crumbled into panic and then hardened into defiance. The bitter words we'd exchanged, the trap I'd laid and watched him stumble into. Elena, Marcus continued when I didn't answer, was diagnosed with acute lymphoblastic leukemia 14 months ago. The insurance covers most of her treatment, but there are gaps. Experimental medications, additional testing, transportation costs for 3-hour drives to Cincinnati Children's Hospital twice a week. And Danny has been helping financially. Against my protests, Marcus said firmly. When I told him about Elena's diagnosis, I just needed someone to listen. I never expected, he started sending money the next week. Insisted it was temporary, just until I got back on my feet after missing so much work. His voice cracked slightly. That temporary help has lasted over a year. I leaned against the cubicle wall, feeling suddenly exhausted. How much? Ms. Chen, I don't think. How much, Marcus? He stared at his computer screen, his jaw working silently for several seconds. $18,000. So far. The number hit me like a physical blow. $18,000 from a 23-year-old living in his parents' basement, desperate for work, frustrated enough to post cruel things on social media but compassionate enough to bankrupt himself for a friend's sick child. The job he interviewed for today, Marcus said quietly, he needed it for Elena. Not just for himself. Her next round of treatment starts in 2 weeks, and I can't accept any more of his help. He's already sacrificed too much. I closed my eyes, seeing Danny's face again during our interview. His desperation when he'd realized who I was. His anger when he'd accused me of manipulation. His final words, maybe ask yourself who's really being cruel here. Marcus, I said carefully, if I were to reconsider Danny's application, would that create any awkwardness for you? Any concerns about working with a friend? His head snapped up, hope and caution warring in his expression. Ms. Chen, Danny Morrison is the most ethical person I know. Whatever happened in that interview, whatever you think you know about him, he's the kind of person who gives away money he doesn't have to help sick children. The kind of person who volunteers at animal shelters on weekends while working 3 part-time jobs. 3 part-time jobs. Not just the volunteer work Linda had mentioned, but 3 jobs while sending most of his income to help Elena. I need to make some calls, I said, already heading back toward my office. At 5:23 p.m., I dialed Danny's cell phone with shaking fingers. It went straight to voicemail. I called Danny's number 4 more times over the next hour, each attempt going straight to voicemail. By 6:30 p.m., the office was empty except for the security guard and me, still sitting at my desk with Kaiser's warm weight against my legs. My dog had positioned himself as close as possible, sensing my distress with that intuitive understanding that never failed to humble me. At 7:15 p.m., Linda finally answered her phone on the 5th ring. What do you want, Sarah? Her voice was flat, emotionally exhausted. Where is he? I've been calling for 2 hours. He turned his phone off. Said he needed time to think. A pause. He's at the animal shelter. Been there since he left your office. Maggie, that golden retriever from the photo, she's being put down tomorrow morning. Danny wanted to spend her last night with her. The irony was so sharp it cut. My nephew, the one who'd suggested Kaiser should be euthanized, was sitting vigil with a dying dog while I'd spent the afternoon discovering the depth of his actual character. Linda, I need to tell you something about Elena Fernandez. I know you found out about Elena. Danny figured you'd piece it together once you talked to Marcus. Her voice cracked. He made me promise not to tell you about the money he's been sending. Said it would look like emotional manipulation if it came up during the interview. My throat tightened. Even facing rejection, Danny had tried to protect the integrity of the process. I need to fix this. Do you? Or do you need to feel better about what you did? Linda's question was surgical in its precision. Because there's a difference, Sarah. A big one. I was wrong. Completely, utterly wrong. Yes, you were. The question is what you're going to do about it. I stared at Danny's resume, still open on my computer screen. At the top, in small print, was an address I'd overlooked before, 2847, Volunteer Drive. The same street as the animal shelter where he spent his Saturdays. He'd been living close enough to walk there, spending his gas money on Elena's medications instead. The shelter, I said. What time do they close? Sarah, don't. What time, Linda? A long sigh. Visiting hours end at 8 p.m. for volunteers. But Sarah, if you show up there tonight, if you ambush him when he's saying goodbye to a dying animal, I'll be there to apologize. To offer him the job. The words came out before I'd fully processed the decision, but they felt right. More right than anything I'd said all day. The job he earned or the job you're giving him out of guilt? Another surgical question. I looked at his qualifications again, Michigan State, magna cum laude, solid references, community involvement I'd completely missed in my rush to find ammunition against him. The job he earned. That he should have had from the beginning if I'd conducted an actual interview instead of, whatever that was. 87,000, Linda said suddenly. What? The starting salary he'll need. Elena's next treatment protocol costs $23,000 out of pocket. Marcus finally told him tonight that the insurance denied the experimental drug therapy. Her voice was hollow. Danny called me from the shelter at 6. Said he was going to drop out of the volunteer program and pick up a 4th job. Pizza delivery, overnight shifts. For jobs to support someone else's child while living in his parents' basement and applying for positions he was overqualified for. The math was devastating. My nephew had been working himself into the ground while I built a case for his moral inadequacy based on bitter social media posts. 87,000, I repeated. I can do that. Sarah, the position was listed at 78. Then I'm adjusting the salary range. I was already pulling up our HR database, modifying the job posting in real time. Senior Marketing Coordinator, revised compensation package. Marcus deserves a raise too, Elena shouldn't be his financial responsibility alone. You can't solve everything with money. But I could solve this. Elena's treatment, Danny's future, the weight of my own conscience, all of it could be addressed with decisions that should have been obvious from the beginning. If I'd looked past my hurt feelings, if I'd seen the full picture instead of focusing on the cruel words that had wounded my pride. Kaiser lifted his head and looked toward the office door, ears perked. A moment later, I heard the elevator chime. Linda, I said, someone's here. I have to go. The elevator chime echoed through the empty office building, followed by the soft ding of arrival. I ended the call with Linda, my heart hammering against my ribs as footsteps approached down the darkened hallway. Kaiser struggled to his feet, tail wagging uncertainly. He recognized the sound of someone familiar but couldn't place who. A soft knock came at my door. Aunt Sarah. Your car's still in the parking garage. Danny's voice was different than it had been during our disastrous interview, quieter, drained of the anger and desperation that had fueled our confrontation. I looked down at myself, still in my wrinkled business suit at 7:30 p.m., and realized how pathetic I must seem. Come in. He opened the door slowly, like he was entering a crime scene. His expensive interview suit was gone, replaced by faded jeans and a Cincinnati Animal Shelter volunteer t-shirt that had seen better days. His hair was disheveled, and I could see tear tracks on his cheeks that he tried to wipe away. I came back for my portfolio, he said, not quite meeting my eyes. Left it in your office when I stormed out like an idiot. The leather portfolio sat exactly where he'd abandoned it, filled with work samples that demonstrated real talent. Campaigns he'd developed during internships, creative briefs that showed strategic thinking, a body of work that would have impressed me under normal circumstances. Danny, sit down. Please. I'd rather just grab my stuff and go. But he didn't move toward the portfolio. Instead, he remained frozen in the doorway, looking smaller and younger than his 23 years. Maggie died 20 minutes ago. Peaceful, in her sleep. I was holding her when it happened. The words hung between us like a prayer. Kaiser whined softly and attempted to walk toward Danny, his back legs trembling with the effort. Without thinking, Danny stepped forward and knelt down, letting my dog lean against him for support. Hey there, handsome, Danny whispered, scratching behind Kaiser's ears with surprising gentleness. You're having a rough day too, aren't you? I watched my nephew, the same person who'd posted cruel things about disability parking, who'd suggested Kaiser should be euthanized, carefully help my dog settle back onto his bed. Danny's movements were practiced, confident, like someone who'd spent considerable time with animals who needed extra care. She was 14, Danny continued, still focused on Kaiser. Hip dysplasia, arthritis, kidney issues. Been at the shelter for 8 months because everyone wanted puppies. His voice cracked slightly. I kept thinking maybe someone would see past her problems, you know. See that she still had love to give. The parallel wasn't lost on either of us. Danny, I know about Elena Fernandez. His hand stilled on Kaiser's fur. Marcus told you. $18,000 over 14 months. While you've been living in your parents' basement and getting rejected from jobs. I kept my voice gentle. Why didn't you mention her during the interview? Because it would have looked like manipulation. Like I was trying to guilt you into hiring me because I helped pay for a sick kid's treatments. Danny finally looked up at me, his eyes red-rimmed but steady. I wanted the job based on my qualifications, not my sob story. Even knowing how much Elena needed that money. Especially then. Marcus deserves better than having his daughter used as leverage for his friend's career. Danny stood up carefully, making sure Kaiser was comfortable before stepping away. Besides, after what I said about Kaiser, I didn't deserve your pity hire anyway. The shame in his voice was devastating. This wasn't the arrogant young man from the interview or the bitter social media poster I'd researched. This was someone who'd spent the evening holding a dying dog while processing his own professional humiliation. The job is yours, I said quietly. Starting Monday, $87,000 annually, full benefits. His head snapped up. What? The position. Senior Marketing Coordinator. It's yours if you want it. Danny stared at me for a long moment, his expression cycling through confusion, hope, and suspicion. Because you feel guilty. Because Mom called and made you realize what a shit person I'm not. Because Marcus Fernandez recommended you. Because your portfolio demonstrates exactly the skills we need. Because I should have seen past my hurt feelings and evaluated you fairly from the beginning. And the things I said about Kaiser. I looked down at my dog, now sleeping peacefully after Danny's gentle attention. Were cruel and wrong. But they don't erase everything else you've done. The volunteer work, supporting Elena, helping Marcus prepare for his interview here. I paused. People are complicated, Danny. More complicated than their worst moments. Danny remained standing by Kaiser's bed, his hands shoved deep in his jeans pockets. 87,000, he repeated slowly, like he was testing the words. That's 9,000 more than the posted salary. Elena's treatment costs 23,000 out of pocket. Marcus told me the insurance denied the experimental therapy. I pulled up the revised job posting on my computer. Consider it a signing bonus, distributed over 12 months. His laugh was sharp, bitter. A signing bonus for the nephew who called your dog a crippled mutt. That's rich, Aunt Sarah. It's a competitive salary for someone with your qualifications who's demonstrated exceptional character in his personal life. Exceptional character. Danny's voice rose, startling Kaiser awake. I spent the last 6 months posting nasty shit about disabled people online because I was angry and broke and looking for someone to blame. Real fucking exceptional. The profanity hung in the air between us. I'd never heard Danny swear in front of me before, even during our confrontational interview, he'd maintained some level of family respect. You also spent the last 14 months bankrupting yourself for a friend's child. You volunteered over 200 hours at an animal shelter. You coached Marcus through job interviews while working 3 part-time positions. I stood up from my desk chair, every joint protesting after the emotionally exhausting day. Which version of you is the real Danny Morrison? Maybe they both are. Maybe that's the problem. He walked to the window overlooking downtown Cincinnati, his reflection ghost-like in the darkened glass. The city lights twinkled below us, restaurants, bars, apartment buildings where normal families were having normal dinners without job sabotage or dying dogs or sick children requiring experimental treatments. Marcus called me after you talked to him, Danny said quietly. Told me you were asking questions about Elena. I knew you'd piece together the money trail eventually. He thinks very highly of you. Marcus sees the best in everyone. It's his biggest flaw. Danny turned back toward me, his expression unreadable. But you want to know what's really fucked up about today? Sitting in your office, watching Kaiser struggle to walk across the room, seeing how gentle he was even after everything I'd said about him, it made me realize what a piece of shit I'd become. Kaiser's tail thumped weakly against his bed at the mention of his name. When I was 8, we had a dog named Buster, Danny continued. Golden retriever mix, blind and one eye from an infection the shelter couldn't afford to treat. Dad wanted to return him, said a damaged dog would be too much work. His voice softened. But you convinced them to keep him. Spent your first Christmas bonus on his eye surgery, bought him special toys for blind dogs. I worshipped you for that. I had no memory of this conversation, but the timeline fit. 8 years ago, I'd been 26 and making decent money for the first time in my life. Somewhere along the way, I forgot that lesson. Forgot that the woman who saved Buster was the same aunt I was trashing for saving Kaiser. Danny's shoulders sagged. The job offer, is it real? Or is this your version of an apology? It's real. But Danny, I need to know something first. I hesitated, then pushed forward. The social media posts, the comments about disability, is that really how you feel? Because this position involves client interaction, community outreach, representing the company's values. His face flushed red. Those posts were me being an asshole because I was frustrated and broke and jealous of everyone who seemed to have their shit together. Including you. He met my eyes directly. But no, that's not who I want to be. Maggie taught me that tonight. How? She spent her last hour trying to comfort me instead of the other way around. Kept nudging my hand when I started crying, like she knew I needed the contact more than she did. His voice broke slightly. Damage doesn't mean worthless. I should have learned that lesson years ago. 6 months later, I was sitting in the same office chair when Monica knocked on my door with a familiar grin. The Q3 client satisfaction reports are in, and you're going to want to see Danny's numbers. Kaiser looked up from his bed, a newer, more expensive orthopedic model that Danny had researched and recommended after noticing how stiff my dog's joints were on cold mornings. In the months since starting at TechReach Digital, my nephew had become Kaiser's unofficial second caretaker, often staying late just to help with evening physical therapy sessions. How good are we talking? I asked, though Danny's success had been evident for weeks. The Henderson account he'd inherited from Marcus, who'd been promoted to creative director, had expanded into a $340,000 annual contract. The Riverside healthcare campaign Danny designed had won 3 industry awards. 96% client satisfaction rating. Highest in company history. Monica set the report on my desk with obvious pride. And Sarah? Elena Fernandez is officially in remission as of yesterday. The last piece of news hit me harder than the professional accomplishments. Elena's experimental treatment, funded by Danny's salary and a company healthcare plan I quietly enhanced, had exceeded every doctor's expectation. Marcus had sent photos of his 8-year-old daughter riding her bike for the first time in 18 months, a normal kid doing normal kid things. There's something else, Monica continued. Danny wanted me to give you this. She handed me a printed email from the Cincinnati Animal Shelter. The subject line read, Volunteer Recognition, Daniel Morrison. Dear Tech Reach Digital. We wanted to inform you that your employee Daniel Morrison has been selected as our 2024 Volunteer of the Year. Over the past 18 months, Danny has contributed 847 hours of service, specializing in the care of senior and special needs animals, most notably, Danny spearheaded our Second Chances program, which has successfully placed 34 animals with disabilities in loving homes. His patience, compassion, and advocacy have transformed how our community views animals with special needs, Danny often tells adopters about his aunt's German Shepherd, Kaiser, as an example of how disabled animals can live full, joyful lives with the right support. We understand Kaiser was a rescue himself. Thank you for modeling the compassion that Danny now shares with our most vulnerable animals, Sincerely. Jennifer Martinez, DVM. Shelter Director. I read the email twice, my throat tight with an emotion I couldn't quite name. Through my office window, I could see Danny in the conference room, presenting campaign mock-ups to a potential client. His confidence was genuine now, built on actual accomplishments rather than desperate bravado. Kaiser struggled to his feet and limped to the window, tail wagging as he spotted Danny through the glass. My dog had always been a good judge of character, should have trusted his instincts from the beginning. My phone buzzed with a text from Linda, family dinner Sunday. Danny's bringing Elena, she wants to meet Kaiser. You better be there. I looked down at my dog, whose tail was now wagging enthusiastically at the prospect of visitors. What do you think, buddy? Ready to meet your biggest fan? Kaiser's tail thumped against the floor 3 times, his version of an enthusiastic yes. Sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. Sometimes it's giving someone the chance to become who they were always capable of being. My nephew had mocked my German Shepherd and found himself face to face with his worst assumptions about compassion and worth. But the real victory wasn't in his humiliation, it was in watching him choose to become better. The job interview that was supposed to be my nephew's punishment had become his salvation. And mine too.